Ed sucks in this game? I don't think Ed sucks. I've heard a lot of people saying Ed is really good. Like, I've heard a lot of people saying that Ed's like right out of potentially like top 7, top 8, which is good. Because the other than like the top 2, right? Because when you think of the best characters in Street Fighter, let me go ahead and hold on. Let's turn some tunes back on, shall we? Hold up. Let's turn some tunes on. Wait, is it this one? There we go. Other than like the top 2 or top 3 characters in Street Fighter right now, which people are considering like Luke and Ken. Still, Luke and Ken are probably still considered the top 2 characters in the game. After you get out of those 2 very overtuned characters, the rest of the meta feels really solid. Like, you can play the Rashids, you can play Marissa, you can play JP, you can play Guile, you can play DJ, you can play Jury, you can play Cammy. There is so many good characters, and people are putting Ed in that camp of characters that's right outside of the upper echelon of the game. Ed, what would that be? There's so, like, I think that the worst character in the game and the best character in the game are closer than they've ever been in Street Fighter 6. Previous Street Fighters, the worst character in the game and the best character in the game were chasms away from each other in comparison to Street Fighter 6. You could look at Street Fighter 5 and you could see like Release Zangief, and he was fucking dog shit in comparison to like Ryu, who maybe wasn't even like the best character in Release Street Fighter 5. And then we could go to Sagat in Vanilla Street Fighter 4, and we could look at the worst character at that point in time, Vega. I think Vega was the worst, so we're like tied for the worst. And it was a huge chasm. Like, it was like big. You could take Zangief, Manon, Lily, right? The characters people think are the legitimate worst in Street Fighter 6. And they're not this far away from Luke and Ken and JP and Rashid. They're like this far. It's not as bad. So playing a character that sucks really isn't as much of an issue, because sucking is comparative in this game. It's relative to the strongest characters in the game, not the systems of the game. Because every character can use the systems of the game to become significantly better. Also, being a tier horse seems kind of weird for you as someone who plays arguably a bottom 10 character in their main game, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I think people consider Little Mac bottom 10, right? Or like bottom 15. So it's weird to be like, I love Little Mac, and then say, fuck Ed, he's not good. When he probably is. I think Ed actually recently won a major. He won, or one of the smaller majors. He won Texas Showdown in the hands of Brian F., who also played JP before swapping to Ed for that major. So like and I think this is like a thing with like all new fighters, which is good. Like fighters like maybe since like, I don't know, 2018, 2017. The gap between the highest and the lowest tier character is like slowly shrinking, and it's becoming more about matchups than it is about like actual character strength, because they try to make sure that almost every character has the necessary tools to compete, right? I think there was a time in Dragon Ball FighterZ that you can think of that not every character had a Bardock style like lariat. And what I mean is, like, he has like the big lunging punch that goes either up, down, or like straight in front, like a Jun lunge, like a Yun lunge punch from like Street Fighter 4, and it dominated the game while he was the best character in the game. And then they slowly started giving that style of move to other characters to make sure that every character had that as a tool, or had a move in similar vein, right? You can think of Android 21, Labco 21. She's got the spin. You can think of Gogeta. Is it Gogeta or Vegito? He's got the fucking 2M of the gods, right? And the 2L of the gods. And then you can think of like UI Goku, Kid Goku. Even older characters were given moves like that, where they lunge forward and are safe, or lunge forward and then can use like a bar of meter to keep them safe with like a vanish, like a Trunks. I don't remember what it's called. The Slash. I don't know the name of the Slash. I barely know the name of Change the Future and Masenko. Okay, don't ask me. I'm not a Dragon Ball nerd like that. And that was like the first game that started to really homogenize, or at least that I could think of in recent memory, that started to homogenize character tools to make it so everyone could like relatively play the game, and then it just came down to matchups. Right? And you could see like later seasons of Tekken 7, they also started to do that, where characters that previously before didn't have standing i15 launchers or 15 frame, whatever you want to call it, 15 frame launchers. They started making sure that everyone across the cast had them. A game like Soul Calibur 6, most of the cast has a 16 frame super or an 18 frame super, like very normal. The 18 frame was generally safe, the 20 frame one's safe, and the 16 frame ones were unsafe to other 16 frame buttons or 14 frame buttons. And that's kind of how they like balanced the supers in the game. Most characters had i18 or i20, right, within like 2 to 4 frames of each other, i20 or i18 3Bs for whiff punishment, for launching, and they had like the generic 12 frame like low poke, the 2A, or the 14 frame 2K, which is an actual true low that's like minus on hit, but you can use it to like eke in damage or steal out a round. And it also tech crouches, right? And that's something that's been happening for a long time. You could even look at a game like Street Fighter V when they started giving the second V triggers, and a lot of characters had similar things that they could do with another character's V trigger 1 and their V trigger 2. And it just seems like they want the games, I'm sure I've said this a good few times now, they want the games to feel more like a matchup chart than a tier list. They want you to map out what characters beat what characters, and then have that full spreadsheet and graph to define what the top tiers are. Because there can be a character who's the worst character in the game, and it's only because they lose to every character, or multiple characters, a lot of characters. Like 6-4, right? They lose 6-4, I'm sorry, 4-6, or like 4.5 to 5.5, and it would theoretically make them one of the worst characters or weaker characters in the game. But when you look at their matchup spread, they're only narrowly losing to the entire cast. So does it really make them a bad character, or does it just make them weaker comparatively to the rest of the cast? Like, I don't really think in a modern fighting game right now, outside of a few examples in Tekken and a few examples in Street Fighter, that most characters in fighting games now don't suck. They're just not as strong as the strongest characters in the game. They're still viable and can still win, especially at like a regional level of play, a local level of play, and like your online matches. It's hard to say that like Aki, for all of her problems, Lily, for all of her problems in Street Fighter, there's a bunch of people in Master with those characters. Because you can make it there against the general player base, even with your bad or shitty character, because they're still like the character works. They have a full working moveset that works as intended most of the time, right? We're not even talking about like some characters triple jabs not linking because they're pushed too far out, whatever. They can slowly fix that. Or maybe they'll make that an actual character weakness, which I don't agree with, but whatever. Or the bears in Tekken, right? The bears are pretty bad. Like they're relatively low tier, but there's a bunch of people in God of Destruction, Tekken God, Tekken Emperor, Tekken God Supreme with those characters, with the bears, with the Leroys before the patch, the Fino before the patch, because they still had things that they could do that made them unique and strong in ways that other characters didn't have. I think we should think about matchups more and character tier less. It really helps push the narrative of how balanced the game is, rather than just saying, this top tier does all these things and this low tier doesn't do any of those. This low tier must be bad. Like, that low tier might beat a good few characters in the game, but just randomly doesn't do the absurd, powerful things that the strongest characters in the game can do. And while I still think that's necessarily a problem and should be fixed, I think there's more creative ways to look at it, because then you're not just making the weak character have to play the same game as the strong character. You're giving them unique ways or their own way to play a game plan that is as effective or as strong as the best characters in. Right? You could go the homogeny route of like Dragon Ball FighterZ, or you could just find unique ways to buff the character, like they're trying to do with Tekken 8, to make those characters' strengths shine, so that it feels like they're playing their own game, but they're still really good at it, and it makes for a more dynamic gameplay experience, where not every character is playing the same, but they're all relatively viable. That's really what you look for in fighting games. I don't think like every character needs to be super buff or super weak. I think that they should try to find a Mario of the game. I can say that for like Smash 4 and maybe Ultimate. Because Mario's like relatively good in Ultimate, but he's not like really ridiculously stupid. Like, he's got some funny things about him, but he's not ridiculously. So if you look at the Mario of like Smash 4 and Smash Ultimate, you could like use that as like a balancing point. Like, no character should be stronger than this or like have tools more degenerate than this. Like this is where we want the game to be roughly. So let's start moving characters up and like slowly moving some characters down. And yes, I use Smashed as like an example, but you could probably even use a game like Street Fighter, right? You could say Ryu is like right in the middle of the cast. And there's a few characters above him that do kind of degenerate things, and there's a few characters below that don't do strong enough things to really compete with the tiers above Ryu. Like Ryu would be like the gatekeeper. And you could buff those characters to be Ryu tier, so that the lowest tier character is still solid and playable, and isn't like utter garbage, but isn't like doing stupid degenerate things that we don't want. Giovanna tier in Strive. Maybe Giovanna's not as strong as she used to be, where she used to be like perfectly middling, like right in the middle, right under the top tiers. I don't know. I haven't really kept up with Strive, so maybe that's a bad idea. Testament. For a while I was like, oh yeah, people say Testament's like really solid, like probably one of the stronger mid tiers. Maybe balance the game around Testament, kind of like that. But I don't know where Strive's at, so I can't speak on that. But just the general concept of finding a middle ground and trying to push characters up or pull characters down to that, to weaken or strengthen the field as a whole, instead of just clamoring for buffs or nerfs for the characters that like are too overtuned or too weak. That's just like a way to think about game design. I won't say that it's the best, but it probably creates more matchup based tier lists than it does tier list, because the characters become so much closer to one another. And I think that's all what we all want, right? We don't want to have to play the same character. Like, we don't want every character to just be Dragunov in a different skin. Like, I don't want Alisa doing what Dragunov did. And I don't want Panda and Kuma doing what Dragunov did. I don't want Leo doing what Dragunov did. I want them to all have their own unique strengths and weaknesses while still being maybe as strong as Dragunov is now. Maybe that's still too strong. Maybe, like, I don't know, as strong as, like, I can't think of who's, like, fucking fair. Tekken is wild right now. Maybe, like, Claudio tier, right? I think Claudio is pretty good. I think Claudio is somewhere, like, close to lower mid. Maybe like Law tier. Law's a little cheapies, but he's not super cheapies. Holy shit, that was so loud and it scared me. Anyways, let me know how you guys feel about that down in the comment section down below. How you feel about thinking about a game more for the balance purposes of creating a more well-rounded cast rather than a very spread out cast of characters being too strong or too weak. How do you feel about games slowly driving the tier lists closer and closer together? Leave those comments down below. Talk about it. Discuss with others. Discuss with me. If you want to discuss with me not in YouTube and you want to do it beforehand, come to the YouTube channel. I'm sorry, come to the Twitch channel. Otherwise, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more of these talks. This has been Beanie Thuggish, talking about character viability, balancing around a common denominator, signing out and saying peace.